Good morning. My name is Osman Kamara. I was born and raised in Lokoti, one of the slums of Freetown, Sierra Leone in Western Africa. As I look back over my life and see how far God has brought me and the impact missionaries made on my life, all I could say is thank God and thank you to the missionaries for answering the call to go into the mission field. I am a product of missionaries' obedience and compassion. You see, I was born in an impoverished environment to uneducated, polygamous, Muslim parent in extreme poverty with no hope for the future, but God. My parent did not earn more than $100 a month. Our house was made of sticks, mud, corrugated zinc sheets that was fastened by rocks and nails with dirt and cement floors. We had no running water in the house. There is no toilet in the house. When it rained, we have to use cans and buckets to hold the water so it won't wet our clothes. My mother was a housewife and a fish trader. My father was a tribal section chief, and he also was a tailor by trade. My father was a religious man. He was a Muslim. He brought in a Muslim cleric to live with us in the house. And my dad built a place in front of our house designated to Muslim worship. But one thing my dad did that was very, very good, and I appreciate him for that. My dad sent me to a Catholic elementary school, St. Edward's Primary School. That was where I was first introduced to Catholic missionaries. I was introduced to the Bible, the catechism, and I started attending Catholic Mass. During holidays, my father would send me up to the village to Grandpa Macaulay. You see, Grandpa Macaulay was a builder. And in 1979, I remembered missionaries from the United Pentecostal Church here in the United States came to our village to build a church. One of the missionaries' name was Mr. O'Keefe. Mr. O'Keefe was a retired colonel from North Carolina. Mr. O'Keefe asked my grandpa, he said, I want to buy a land and build a church in your village. And my grandfather said, no, I'm not going to sell you the land. I'm going to donate the land, and also I'm going to help you to build a church. They gave my grandpa 50,000 leones, which is about $5. And I remember helping grandpa and the missionaries build the church. All the children and the youth in our village all came together to help the missionaries to build this church. The missionaries took lots of pictures of us. We had great time building the church and singing Christian songs and having church. They took lots of pictures of us. You know, I always tell my friends when they ask, do you have a childhood photo? I said, no, I don't. But I know one thing, my photo will be in some United Pentecostal missionary album in the United States somewhere. You see, walking alongside the missionaries was fun and amazing. As a young man, I loved to touch them. And also when they held my hand, I feel special. But upon returning back to Freetown, my father became ill of kidney disease. And one night on April 1st, I was the only one awake. And I watched my father grasp for air, trying to breathe. And I watched him breathe his last on earth. On April 1st, 1980, my father died at age 45. I remember the scene like it was yesterday. I was upset. It felt like a bad exchange of a baton in a race. My father looked up to me and he breathed his last. I covered his body and called everybody in the house and tell them the news. I was only 12 years old. After my father died, my mother was left with the responsibility to take care of us, myself and my siblings, and 2 other cousins, her brother's kids. Things were not the same anymore. Sometimes we don't even have enough food to eat. There was no money for my school fees and lunch. So mother make us, myself and my sibling, he had us sell fish and rice and kerosene and tomato paste just to find lunch money and to find school fees, while she continued to sell fish to make ends meet. See, towards the end of 1980, one day while I was walking home from school, there was a nurse lady up the street that lived away from us there that knows our family situation. Her name was Tunde Lady Cole. She asked to speak to mother and I about me coming to live with her. She offered to take me in as a foster child. My mother agreed for me to go live with her. And I was looking for a way out of my condition, so I agreed to go live with her. See, she lived in a very big modern home. But she has no workers or servant in the house. So I pretty much have to do all the house chores, every last one of them. She was a Christian lady. She took me to church. She had me read the Bible. But Miss Tunde was very strict and disciplined. It was hard living with her or working for her. But it was a blessing because now I get to live in a modern home. My school fees and lunch money were taken care of. I ate well. And I was exposed to the so-called elites of our nation. But I remember one morning in 1985, on our way to church, Miss Tunde collapsed. I was there with her that morning. I called for help and they rushed her into the hospital. She was pronounced, later determined that she died of stroke. Miss Tunde died. I was 17 years old. After the completion of my high school in 1986, I returned briefly home to my mother. But I was back out again in the streets looking for a job and hanging with my friends and staying with them and their parents. And in mid-1987, a cousin of mine by the name of Alim, who I respected and admired because of the way he carries himself, he asked me to come follow him to church. I agreed to go with him. He was attending the Wesleyan church in Lumley. There again, I met a lot of Wesleyan missionaries from America. There was one particular one, Kevin Muller, who comes from Oklahoma, big guy, very fun to be around. These people were so dedicated, these missionaries were so dedicated to our country that they learn our language and live among us as brothers and sisters. During that time, I received Christ. And I was baptized by Pastor Henry Foner. Pastor Foner discipled me and taught me Bible. But shortly after, Pastor Foner was transferred to another church outside of Freetown to a place called Kenema. And my cousin and I decided to join another pastor to help him start a new church called G's Ministries. And in 1991, I had the opportunity to travel to the United States through one of my cousins, Marietta Jones, who sponsored me, and some missionaries. You see, missionaries have played a lot of role, very big part in my life. In the book of Matthew 25:40, Jesus said, "Whatsoever you do to the least of these, you've done unto me." 30 years later, the United Pentecostal missionaries are gone from our village. My grandfather has died long since, but there are Christians now in that village. And I remember in 2004, my wife and I returned home. We immediately saw the need for children's education. So we joined partner with a mission team here in the villages and built two buildings for the kids. We built a freshwater well for them. We built an outhouse for them to have water to drink, and also a bathroom. We also shipped desks and chairs from the United States to that school. And currently there is 160 children having education in that school, in the Macaulay Memorial Elementary School, named after my grandfather. You see, in the village today, in the village in Mafore, the church that my grandfather and the missionaries built on my grandfather's land, the church that I assisted the missionaries, my grandfather, to build, is falling apart. And the people came to me and said, Usman, would you and your missionaries help build a church for us? And I remembered 30 years ago what happened there. The fun that I had working alongside missionaries with my grandpa. And I answered yes. Today, I found myself being that same missionary that goes into the world and assists people. When I travel to Africa and I see children, I remember how I grew up in Africa as a child and the interaction I had with missionaries and the impact they made in my life was inspirational and was life-changing. God has created me. He has saved me and called me and commanded me to go and make disciples.